Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and of course, I'm here with the co-founders of Catalyst Sale, Mike Simmons and Mike Connor. We have a listener question this week, Mike and Mike. Michelle wrote in. She said she just signed up for the weekly digest, and she's wondering if you talk about resellers because they, where Michelle works, does not have a direct sales team.
Well, that's a great question. You know, when I think about the different things that we've talked about and that we've shared with the teams, I would say the vast majority of it is tied to direct sales organizations or building, sales teams and things like that. But actually, a big part of our business is working with clients in particular that use channel partners or resellers, oftentimes at the beginning of their launch phase. Before they want to make an investment in an entire team or an organization, they might want to leverage the expertise or the access or the networks from strategic partners or resellers or channel partners, whatever you'd like to call them. And there are some nuances between each of those, but it's actually a good question. And it is something that we should talk about more because particularly in the space that we work in early stage companies and developing companies, oftentimes that's how they test the market is by, leveraging those networks and those companies that can get them quick access. And there's certainly advantages to that. And there's costs involved. And there's conflict things. So we could probably make a whole topic this week just talking about that and talk about our experience in facilitating those relationships, managing those relationships, and having them become part of either exclusively as a distribution model or as what we tend to do is with a combined strategy where eventually you have resellers and channel partners that work alongside your direct sales force.
So maybe we start with why you would look to find a partner to help you go to market. For me, this has always been that buy versus build proposition. Is my business going to be better suited by building out an internal capability or capacity to deliver a product to a defined market? Or am I going to be better off by buying that expertise, basically investing with a partner who's already in that market, maybe has a product that is already meeting needs of an audience that's similar to the audience that I'm targeting with my product. And these two things may be complementary in the marketplace, or this might create an incremental revenue opportunity inside their customer base. So do I want to pay or invest in their skills, their experience, their network to accelerate growth for the organization? So for me, I look at this as a buy versus build proposition.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the equation. And oftentimes what you need in the early stages is you need access to the market. You need access to buyers and doing it organically with your own sales team that is really starting from zero. It can be not only an expensive task, but it takes time. And I think what you can look at is how quickly could we accelerate that if we partnered with somebody that already has partners, access, customers, where it makes sense. It really, what it gets down to is it really needs to make sense for both sides. If you just have somebody that wants to add your product to a bag of all kinds of different things that they sell, products that they sell, and it's not set up correctly, what ends up happening is you spend a lot of time setting up these relationships and going through the process of, signing non-disclosure agreements and, the actual agreement, the reseller agreement itself, and it has to pass through legal on both sides and you negotiate the terms and all that stuff. And then when it goes to the stage where it's going to be launched, depending on what the engagement is from the actual sales reps that are going to be doing that work, a lot of times I've seen initiatives just absolutely fall flat where a little nuanced detail like how is a sales rep going to be compensated selling this product versus several other products that they already represent in the market. If you make a mistake just with that one little detail, you'll find that the sales reps, they're just not interested in selling your product. So it's tricky because you give up control when you use a reseller or use a partner. And sometimes that's with intent, but at the same time, there are some details that will determine whether or not that reseller relationship ultimately results in sales.
And I think what you're really keying in on is there's multiple layers to it. So one layer is product market fit. Another layer is, are they working with the right contacts? Another layer is setting up a compensation model that would make sense for a sales rep to introduce this to their customer. Another layer is sales training, educating that sales force on how the product works, how it fits in the market, why this is important to their customer base. And another piece that you start to apply is ability to execute. Because, above and beyond all the questions around, can I generate revenue? You also start to think about how much is it going to cost me to generate that revenue, not just from a sales rep compensation perspective, but from a customer support perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a communication perspective. And when you're working with a partner, one of the things you've got to realize is that partner is making decisions on where they want to invest time, energy, and resources. And although this may be a great fit for your product inside their customer base, and you understand how this might apply in their sales cycle, the reality is on their side, it just isn't the right fit. And I think one of the things I heard when Mike was talking there is how important it is to take both perspectives when building these partnerships. It has to make sense not only for you as your business who's looking for a partner, but also make sense for the partner's business and their customers.
Well, let's say we've got to the point where it does make sense to do it this way. Both sides decide to work together. What do we need to consider working with resellers that we might not really have to worry about if we have our own direct sales team?
Great question. And one of the more important pieces on the front end is determining rules of engagement. And if your reseller, so again, in this buy versus build proposition, if the reseller is getting out to a market that you're not currently serving, completely different audience, whether that's based on geography or based on vertical, your risk for channel conflict decreases. However, if there's the potential that you're both working in the same market, your risk for channel conflict increases significantly. So having a certain set of rules of engagement is really important. And I've worked with partners before on this, and they get frustrated with the whole idea of rules of engagement because it starts to create more friction, starts to create more steps that they have to go through. They feel like they're not in complete control of the process. But ultimately, if those rules of engagement aren't established early on in the process, your risk for running into each other in the marketplace and ultimately competing against yourself in the marketplace increases significantly. So for me, what I've tried to establish is a kind of Switzerland approach where there's someone in the organization who has access to both databases. They know the customer list on the partner side. They know the customer list on your organization side. They've got access to that information, and they know how to look at all of the data that's available to them to determine, is this a partner account or is this an account that we should be working with directly based on activity? And they're not emotionally vested in that decision. They're really looking at ones and zeros when they go through that process. But by having that type of person in place, you minimize the concern on the partner side that if I expose my customer list to you, you're just going to go after my customers. And you minimize the risk on your side, which is, well, if I tell them all of the customers that I'm going after, they're going to go after all of those customers. That's a big one for me, is to minimize channel conflict, is to set up clear rules of engagement.
Yeah. And in building trust over time, I mean, the honeymoon phase when everybody has the great ideas and you're putting together these partnerships or reseller relationships, everybody's, looking ahead to the positive outcomes that can happen because of the relationship. But you really do have to be mindful of some of the pitfalls that you can run into. A lot of it has to do with trust and control. And you need to invest in those relationships to make sure there is a very high level of trust so that you can be very open about potential conflicts that happen down the line. And you also have to be ready if you have multiple resellers in different markets or whatever the case might be. So maybe we don't know a lot about Michelle, but maybe they have multiple resellers and could have conflict between those resellers and, discussions around pricing and how is that going to be handled? And you're going to lose some of that control there. So in most cases with companies, either we've worked directly for or our clients that we work with, the reseller strategy, generally speaking, at the early stages of the company, it's the thing that gets them off the ground. And then there's a transition that happens where they decide, okay, we want to have direct access to our customers. We want to have control over the relationship and the pricing. And we want to be able to have basically that experience owned completely by our firm. And then how do we evolve from a reseller relationship to a direct relationship? In some cases, it's that hard switch where you go from one model to the other. In some cases, that reseller might be adding value for you or approaching a market you don't want to get into. So then you might coexist in the market where you have your own direct sales team and you still maintain relationships with resellers. And what Mike was talking about as far as eliminating that tension between the two, that's the thing you really want to manage, because once that starts to become an issue, then the trust starts to diminish a little bit between you and your reseller. And then it becomes a contentious thing that it doesn't help either one of the parties. So it's something you really have to invest in. You can't just set it and forget it and think, oh, they're responsible for these things in the value chain. We're responsible for the product and delivering it. And then everybody worries about their own part of the agreement. But you really kind of have to, it's almost like you have to look at it like a marriage. You know, people say that if both parties only give 50-50, it's probably not going to work. Both sides are going to need to give 100-100 to make it work. And I think you have to kind of look at that with with reseller relationships. You do have to invest time with them.
Yeah. And you can't just do it at Valentine's Day or on your anniversary date or during birthdays or over the holidays. It's not those specific time periods where there's this trigger. Oh, I've got to remember I have a partner out there. You know, what I would recommend is that you schedule ongoing engagement with that partner. One of the things I like to try to set up in any partner relationship is this, and it's building on the idea of trust, and we're really working toward building trust. But it's when I'm working with them in front of their clients, I'm representing them. I'm in there with the logo of the partner on my shirt or the logo of the partner on my hat. I'm a representative of them. And in order to do that well, I've really got to understand their business. And I think another area where organizations fall down is when they stay so focused on their own business. So if I'm going out there and I'm looking for partners and I tend to stay so focused on what's core to my business, who's the audience that I want to reach, how I want individuals to participate in my product, and I don't take into consideration how the partner's customers work, I've set myself up in a really difficult position to make that relationship successful.
Mike Connor, you talked about perhaps making a transition from resellers to a combined strategy or resellers to a direct sales team. How do you get the idea that it might be time to start making a transition?
Well, it's different. You know, there's several reasons. There's not just one reason. Part of it can be based on the financial arrangement that you have with that reseller, where the cost of sales at the beginning, because you were just trying to get product validation and you needed fast results, you were willing to pay a premium to give up some of the, obviously you're giving up some of that revenue to compensate your partner for taking on those responsibilities. And as you scale and you start to see what the true market opportunity is, at some point you'll hit an inflection point where you say, we could probably do this more effectively, more economically, gain the control, gain the direct access to the customers. And it just financially, it just starts to make more sense. Whereas in the beginning, it may not make sense to go out and hire an entire team, particularly if you haven't even truly understood how direct sales team would sell into the market and you don't want to go through the trial and error phase with your own people. In other words, you hire one sort of team to go out and approach the market, and through 6 months of activity, you realize, maybe the strategy wasn't right. We've hired the wrong kinds of people to take this product to market. Now we've got to hit the reset button. And hitting the reset button with your own team gets expensive, whereas finding other partners or those kinds of relationships may not have to go through those same pain points. So there's a lot of different reasons why you'd want to take that shift, but it's generally because you've got a formula now. You understand how you want to take things to market, and you want to improve the profitability overall by hitting that point where you think bringing it internal makes sense.
Another reason you may want to do that is sometimes the partner's business changes. Sometimes there's a pivot on the partner side where maybe they're not addressing the needs of a market that you're interested in any longer. So just It just got to the point where it no longer makes sense to maintain that relationship. So there's the financial side, but there's also the business side that can shift as far as their customer base.
Yeah, another example that kind of comes to mind too is a lot of times, and we've done this too, is really relying on partners or distributors or channel partners in international markets. And so there'll be times where, we really don't have the expertise or the connections or the relationships, understand the culture differences, things like that in other markets. And so if we had a product or something that we wanted to take to India, for example, or someplace where we just don't understand the culture as well as we'd like, and we don't have access, it might make a lot of sense to find somebody in that market that understands how to take a new product to market. You can work with them for a period of time. And then down the line, you can decide, okay, this turned out to be a really good fit for us. We've learned, and now we're looking at the investment side of it, and maybe it makes more sense for us to try and take this on directly. And you've spent the time to gain the knowledge that you need to make informed decisions about who you'd actually want to put in a market or, put on the ground, as we say, in any of these markets. So I don't know, there's definitely advantages to using different kinds of partners.
It was very American of you to refer to everybody else as international.
Yeah. Okay, so let me think about that for a second.
So, and really kind of building on Mike's thoughts. I mean, we have partners that we work with or companies that we work with who are based outside of the US, and their international expansion includes going into the US. So we've helped those organizations build out their sales teams, as an example. So with these relationships, there's so much that you can learn from a partner who lives and breathes inside a specific geography. They understand the culture. They have the network. They know how business gets done in those locations. So as you start to think about growth in Latin America, look for a partner who focuses in that area. If you're thinking about growth in APAC, look for a partner in APAC.
Well, as we wind this down, do you have any final thoughts for Michelle and the others out there that work with resellers?
I think if you take a customer first approach and you know that there's alignment with the partner that you're working with, you can make these relationships really successful, and you can open your company up and your product to markets that you never would have been able to get to on your own. And there's some really neat synergies that can be created with these partnerships. But on the other side, if you don't invest the time, energy, effort into cultivating the relationship, managing the partner, really qualifying partners, you could set yourself up for a lot of time, sunk costs with very little benefit.
Well, I can't let this episode end without bringing up the one thing that brought Michelle to this question, and that is the weekly digest. Can you tell us about that, Mike?
Yeah, so the weekly digest is something that Catalyst Sale is putting out every Thursday. The email should go out right around noon Eastern on every Thursday, and it'll include a curated list of resources that we find interesting as sales professionals. Some of the topics we're going to cover are sales from a leadership perspective. We'll talk about sales process related items. We'll talk about market, creating and identifying markets. It'll be a quick read.
You better talk about resellers and channel partners too.
We better talk about resellers.
Or Michelle's going to be really disappointed. And based on the signups, I'm going to say that Michelle's probably in our top 10 of signups right now. So we could probably make sure that she's well taken care of as being an early adopter, as we call it.
At this point, she might be in the top 20 to 50%, depending on when this goes live.
Well,
so it's going to be an evolving communication. It'll go out via email. We'll take feedback from our subscriber list, and we hope that it's something that folks subscribe to and open up on a weekly basis.
Very good. And if you have a question like Michelle did that you would like to ask on the show, you can just reach out. You can find us on Twitter at Catalyst Sale. You can find us on LinkedIn. Or Mike, what can they do if they just want to send in a question direct? What's the best email address?
Well, you can always use hello@catalystsale.com, and that gets distributed to both of us. So we keep an eye on that. And then you can also go on the website and sign up for the weekly digest, and we'd love to see you there.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.